I'm a big believer in second chances, even for people who commit serious crimes. Who deserves a second chance? Who gets one? And who decides? I'm Jessica Henry, and I'll be your host of Just Justice. I'm a former public defender, a professor of justice studies, and an award-winning author. And I'm excited for us to find new ways to put justice back into our criminal legal system. Hello and welcome to Just Justice. My name is Jessica Henry, and I'll be your host. Today on Just Justice, I'm joined by attorney, educator, and justice advocate Courtney Teasley. After more than a decade in criminal defense, Courtney has shifted her focus towards legal literacy, community advocacy, and what she describes as proactive strategies to disrupt pathways into the criminal legal system before people ever enter a courtroom. Courtney is the founder and CEO of MFN, teaches Know Your Rights education, and works at the intersection of justice, education, and community empowerment. Courtney, welcome to Just Justice.
Oh my goodness, Jessica, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I thought we would get started with a little bit of your backstory before we get into how and why you started your new company, MFN. What first drew you into criminal defense? You're an attorney. You could have picked anything. You picked criminal defense. How come?
Well, I like to tell people, first of all, I'm from what I call the DAMM community. That's the DAMM community, and that stands for the Disproportionately Affected Marginalized Minority Community. So I grew up, in the public school system. I didn't go to any of the magnet schools. I could have, but I did not. And I grew up around the people every day who are preyed upon in the criminal justice system. And so for me, when I came out, I initially wanted to be a pediatrician when I was younger. All right. And I wanted to be my grandfather, my father's side is a pediatrician. And I was like, oh, I can do that. Whatever. Then I went to the hospital one time and I was like, ugh, I hate it here. It's so cold. It
It's
stinks.
cold, and there's blood, and
I
there's
was so
things.
bad. I was like, I don't think this is for me. And so then I was like, lawyer's not too bad. I was already getting practice arguing, debating nonstop at school. And so thus I went to when I went to law school, right before I went to law school, I started working for a criminal defense lawyer. And she's a Black woman here in Nashville. And she was a newer lawyer back in the day. And she was really going hard in the community. She worked for herself and she was able to create all types of sliding scales for those that could not afford her services at the normal level. And I was like, oh yeah, this is perfect. My hands don't have to be tied by the state, right? I'm free to disrupt as much as I want. I'm free to create what I know people in the DAMM community need. And so that's when I chose criminal defense. I was like, this is it. This is what I like. And so and that really came from working with her and also around quite a few other lawyers who were in that same little office area.
And just to be clear, you're in Tennessee, you're in Nashville, and that's where you grew up?
That is born and raised here.
Okay. Now, so there you were, you're doing criminal defense. You had sort of had this mentor person who was doing some disruption, and you thought, hey, I could maybe make a difference here too. And I'm wondering, what is it that you saw when you began your own practice? Were there patterns that you saw repeatedly about your clients' lives before they entered the courtroom? Were there patterns that you saw about the way they were treated in the courtroom? What were some of the things that you started to notice?
What I started to notice is that I was representing so many people. And, again, coming in as a brand new lawyer, I know all the statistics and things now after practicing, but I started recognizing all my clients look just like me, right? I didn't recognize that we were so disproportionately affected in the criminal justice system until I started working in it. Then when I started representing people, I started recognizing, oh my God, we're never taught legal literacy. We don't learn this at all. And that's all the cops and the district attorneys are using against us, right? It's like, I would see that, oh my God, this case could be so much different if you just knew to stand on your Fifth Amendment right, right? To be innocent until proven guilty. Or if you just knew to stand on your right and not, and a lot of times when you don't know these things or you barely know them, you will try to assert them in some manner, but then because you feel not, unconfident in saying it, then you'll just give away the right, right?
Mhm.
And so that kept happening over and over. And I was like, okay, legal literacy is huge. We're being told ignorance of the law is no excuse for breaking the law. You're never teaching me the law. And how is that fair? And
Mhm.
so coming
Mhm.
from a public school background, I knew for a fact you weren't teaching it because I didn't get that knowledge in school when it would have been, it would have been the best time for me to learn it. And then financial literacy. I saw we were devoid of financial literacy. So a lot of people coming into the criminal justice system, it was through crimes of poverty. You're selling drugs or you're, breaking and entering or you're robbed, whatever it is. It was crimes of poverty. And in these places, in the DAMM community, DAMM community, there are not a lot of options, right? To make to higher advancing jobs. And so I was like, okay, well, that's keeping us stuck. We're not learning anything about that. And then finally, civics. We're only told, hey, go vote, but you're never really told how you participate in this system fully, right? What are your full rights as a citizen? And that includes accountability, holding government officials accountable. That includes knowing how to utilize all of the different things that you can do while someone else is fighting a case, right? I'm a normal citizen. I don't like what you did, Officer McOfficer. I'm going to pull your entire personnel record and check it out
Mhm.
myself. We have that power. So those I call them the big three, are missing in education. And I kept seeing that over and over as I was practicing, as I was a professor at a local HBCU here in Nashville, Tennessee State University, in the criminal justice department. I was seeing it over and over. And I was like, oh, okay, these three matter more than we're acknowledging.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a really interesting thing. I loved what you said about how we're told ignorance of the law is no excuse, but then we're never told what the law is. I mean, that's really, really powerful. And also, the intersection of that lack of knowledge with economic disadvantages, with under-resourced communities, and a lack of knowledge of civics. I think it's a really smart connection that you've drawn between these three things and our criminal legal system. And so, at what point did you start thinking, gosh, I'm getting folks once they've been pulled into the system, once they have been arrested, and often well after it is too late for there to be any real intervention about these legal rights that they had. Um, what point did you start thinking that maybe there was room to do something before?
Wow. So that moment came. I want to say initially I started when I came out as a lawyer. One of my first acts of service was to go back to my high school alma mater, which was a high priority school, one of the worst in Davidson County around that time frame that I was going. It was always making the news for something negative. And so I went back there and I was the mock trial coach. And every single year, I did it for 3 years. And we placed every time when previously they got kicked out for fighting or something,
Mhm.
and I went, and when I started teaching them, I was like, oh my God, like there's so much potential in the DAMM community, DAMM, disproportionately affected marginalized minority community, is not touched. It's not helped. It's not curated. It's not cultivated because, we're going up against these private schools and, they have a lawyer on payroll who's with them all year long for them to, practice. However, my students, they did not have that advantage. Some of them were working full time. They were I know a couple were sleeping in their car. Every time I came, they had not eaten. You know what I mean? So it's like we're starting on a different scale here, and so it was first with them that I was able to cultivate their potential over and over. And I was like, these children are hungry for this. And it changes their mindset. Like they become really smart. They're very smart in general. But when they start to learn the law and they start to learn how to apply it and how to utilize it and go back and forth with person in a debate, I was like, oh, this is it. And so when I started teaching at Tennessee State University in the criminal justice department, that's when I got access to the older ones whose prefrontal cortexes are still underdeveloped, as we know. and I was teaching criminal, what was I teaching at that time? American legal systems, maybe. And they gave me like a generic syllabus I could use or not use. And I was like, this is not gonna help. These people, these children are more likely to come into the criminal justice system than anyone else, right? Just because the mere color of their skin. And you want me to teach them theory? It doesn't make sense. I have to teach them practicality. I have to teach them what's likely to happen. I have to teach them their rights. I have to teach them what to do. And so that's what I did. And after I started working in the criminal justice department, I created my own syllabus and I just started teaching them from there what I knew they needed to know, but I don't feel like anyone else really knew they needed to know or they didn't acknowledge it. So that was the beginning of when I started to create structure around what I was doing with my educating as a lawyer.
What specifically were you thinking that you really needed to teach them about? Like, what did you want to make sure they knew?
I love that you asked me that because it's everything that's in my Easy Way to Learn Your Rights book series right now. So the Fourth, the Fifth, and the Sixth Amendment are huge, right? We start with those. What are your rights? Well, first of all, we start with what the criminal justice system is. We start with what the whole American legal system is. We start with all of that good stuff, and they learn, about due process, and they learn about substantive due process. They learn about procedural. They learn about the things that they, hear terms about around, but they don't really understand. I really don't speak above anyone's head. I'm very I take out all the legal jargon just because that's how when someone's life is on the line, they don't need you speaking above their head. They need you speaking in the language they understand. And because I am from the disproportionately affected marginalized minority community, I am bilingual. I speak African American English very well. It is a nationally recognized language, and it is actually what made me very successful as a lawyer because I'm able to articulate to you in a language that you resonate with what is going on and what's happening and what is most important for you to know. So for me, teaching these students, the first thing that was important, yes, let's give them the structure of what the whole thing is. But now I need you to know specifically what big rights come into play in the criminal justice system and how to lean on them, right? And the Fourth Amendment is huge. That's book one. I have a book one on that. The Fifth Amendment is book two. That one is my favorite because I love the Fifth Amendment. It is so just chocked full of all of the rights you need. And, pre-protection is why I really love it. It gives you the power of pre-protection. A lot of people don't really know that. And then the Sixth Amendment, after you've already been charged, right? After you're already indicted, all of those things. Those are the ones that I want them to understand on a deeper level so that way they're actually able to utilize them in real time and are not scared to do so because they don't feel like they understand it fully and end up giving it away. So those were the big three that I would add in immediately to the syllabus and really, kind of test them around. I thought that they did really good in that realm and then they resonated with it because it's like real time and we're able to talk about their friends. We're able to talk about people they know. They're able to see it in action, and so that really kind of sparked off a lot, excuse me, in the criminal justice department over there at TSU. It was great.
It's funny because you said your favorite amendment is the Fifth Amendment. And I always ask my students, what's your favorite amendment? And they always look at me a little crazy, like, favorite amendment? But mine was always the Sixth Amendment because it's chock full of all kinds of great things, including the right to an attorney. But I do hear you. That Fifth Amendment is really powerful too. And I think you're right. There's something really important about making sure that people, particularly people who are impacted by the legal system or have the potential to be impacted by the legal system, understand the rights that they have in ways that resonate for them. So, following up on that, when you say that justice starts before the courtroom, what do you mean by that? Are you talking about that kind of legal literacy?
Yeah, so for me, after I started to just see the power of educating early, right? And I talked about that in my first book with one of my students who got in trouble and immediately knew to reach out to a lawyer. And I mean, when I say in trouble, it was a self-defense shooting. And he shot someone, he had the right to do it. He was being threatened. However, even though you did everything correctly, it doesn't always line up and work that way. The cops may not feel that way. They may twist your words, they may turn it around. And so I started to see that, wow, this is really working. And so then I said, okay, well, we have to do this on a deeper level, right? We have to do this on a deeper. It can't just be me over here at little old TSU teaching this, right? We have to go. Let's go to the schools. Let's go into the high schools. Let's go to where they are normally likely to get in trouble. And let's start empowering everyday people, whether it's churches, whether it's organizations, whoever it is, right? Advocates. We're giving them the proactive steps and we're educating them on something I know they've never been educated on either, right? So we're going to fully educate them and empower them so that way they are able to teach the masses as well. I remember I did a little research on why legal literacy wasn't being taught in schools. And I was only able to find something very, very brief that it was like the English teacher, some English teachers were talking about it. And they were like, they didn't really feel confident in their knowledge of legal issues, and a lot of times they feel like people feel like you have to be a lawyer to teach this type of stuff. And it's like, absolutely not. You're a citizen, right? These are guaranteed to us. You just need to be taught it in a way that makes sense for you. So that way you can go back and teach it in your own language, right? In a way that resonates for those. So that was my thought process. Justice has to start before the courtroom. Meaning before they ever get here, we have to give them a fighting chance. And the only way we give them a fighting chance is if we activate the community that they're going to come into contact with is with more, right? To push and teach them. I always say, hey, teach, like, how you do Sunday school. I think I did a TikTok series on treating, teaching legal literacy like you teach Sunday school, right? Just trying to encourage churches to recognize that this is a huge issue in our specifically Black American community. So we need all hands on deck, kind of how we were just talking about Tennessee, everything that's going on. We need all hands on deck, right? Everybody has to be working in whatever they do. You don't need to be a lawyer, but you need to be activated in a way where you can understand it so you can pass it on. And that's why in my books, I create syllabus. I put a syllabus inside, and it's literally one of the each one teach one. You take it, you read it, and then you go teach someone else, right? That's the format, and that was the thought process I had when I created it.
Now, Courtney, what does MFN stand for?
Ah, I love it. And listen, MFN is a euphemism for a passionately cultured word used in the African American community. Remember, I told you I am bilingual in African American English, and it is always used to describe something that you need to pay extreme attention to. And I could think of nothing more important that people needed to pay attention to than the fact that when I first created this business, that Black Americans were 5 times more incarcerated in the criminal justice system, and we make up only less than 14% of the entire U.S. Now we're 6 times more incarcerated. So it is a passionately culture euphemism, and it is exactly what you think it is. We're a play along the words. We have our framework, which is actually MFN. Our framework, M stands for mindset, stands for finesse, and N stands for non-negotiables. That is woven through all our trainings, our education, all of our speeches, everything. And that's how we break down and teach advocacy training. So yes, it's in your face, but we want it to be in your face because we want you actually to pay attention to this. I started MFN after I had ran a successful campaign in Nashville in 2022. So I've been practicing law as a criminal defense lawyer, as I was telling you early on. But then for one of my very first lawyer coaching clients, I helped her start her business and get up and going. And so I ran her campaign against a judge here that we had found to be harmful. And we were successful in unseating that judge. And it made Nashville history. We had no idea. It was the first time a criminal court judge had ever been unseated in Nashville. And so after we got her on the bench, she's the youngest sitting criminal court judge. I then said, wow, it's time for me to actually move from this one-to-one transaction of trying to help people and helping one person at a time. I want to be able to bring attention to this systemic issue on a larger scale, and I want to be able to create proactive initiatives for it, right? And that is how MFN was born.
Yeah, and you're talking about getting folks elected who reflect your community's values and your belief systems and the things that matter to you and the people around you. I just want to acknowledge that Tennessee is one of the states that's gotten very busy in the wake of the Supreme Court's Voting Rights Act decision. gotten very busy with changing up the districts that will, in many ways, exclude Black voters. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that as it relates to some of the work you've been doing.
Yeah, so, just coming off of I worked a campaign for a judge named Judge Jody Bell, who has a history in criminal justice reform. She's a former public defender. And then I supported another candidate for a criminal court judge. Her name is Don Diener. She's another public defender. She was the head public defender here and created a host of initiatives to address criminal justice reform. And, did not know that both candidates were going to win, but we pretty much swept the board for criminal justice reform in here in Davidson County. And Davidson County's blue. And so we swept the board for criminal justice reform, and I really couldn't even celebrate because Tennessee's under attack, and the Voting Rights Act, like it literally it happened in step. Like I think May 5th, election results came out, and maybe April 30th or May 1st is when it happened. And it was like, oh, okay. So my brain went straight to organizing, right? My brain went straight to now the job is to activate. Right. There's so many voters here in Tennessee, and a lot of them have gotten used to, and they don't come out and vote because I think a lot of them have gotten used to just being the minority or feeling like they're the minority, but we're only the minority because you don't come out and vote. Right. And so I think that sometimes things have to happen to activate people in a different way. I think, a lot of times people think they take rights for granted. They take things for granted. Think, oh, it's always going to be this way, or hey, this was easy to come by. Absolutely not. So I've seen people motivated in a way that they have not been. And I've heard a lot of the organizers here, as well as myself, saying, hey, work your lane. This is time for us each to work wherever you are, whatever you do, in your realm. It's time to use your own power and influence to ignite those around you, to be able to show them why it is important to get out here, to create strategy around that. And so that's what's going on in Nashville. I mean, specifically in Nashville, but like all around, we are touching bases with Memphis. I know they just went down to Alabama, right? I know it was like yesterday they were standing up for Voting Rights Act. So it's a movement at this time, but I can tell you it feels very, very stuffy down here. It feels hard to breathe, right? It feels hard to celebrate anything, even a win for the criminal justice reform, when we recognize that the ones who are in power and able to make the laws, the ones who are in power and able to do the things that affect the criminal justice reform, criminal justice in, the most, they're like what were we saying earlier? They pretty much organize and mobilize immediately to suppress Black votes. And so what are they going to do when they
Yeah.
have control of everything if we don't all enact at this time? So yeah, we're working down here.
Yeah, it sounds like it's all hands on deck for you in Tennessee and for all of us around the country. And, there's a way in which your commitment to teaching about legal literacy can actually help in that movement, right? You've said that legal literacy can serve as a form of prevention in the context of the criminal legal system and maybe in the context of democracy at large. But specifically with respect to criminal justice, what do you mean by that? How can how can simply understanding law and rights and systems, how can that create change?
Oh my gosh. Like that's where I saw with my trial students. Like when you understand legal literacy, right? These are skills that you're learning. You're understanding, first of all, what is bigger? What is at play here? What are the rules of the game? Is like what I like to call it. I always say, even when I would teach my trial, we can't start learning anything until I teach you the rules of the game. Right. And so when you learn the rules of the game, you learn your place in this game, which again, Black Americans are 6 times more incarcerated. And so when you learn that you're more than likely gonna come into contact with this criminal justice system, you move differently when you truly understand it and you understand your rights within it. You move differently. You learn how to advocate on behalf of yourself, right? You learn how to speak up for yourself more confidently. You learn what doesn't make sense because a lot of time, again, ignorance of the law is no excuse for breaking the law. You never taught me the law. So I may do something and not even like a lot of times you'll see a lot of gateway um a lot of gateway crimes to get you into the criminal justice system and stack up charges. Criminal trespass, for instance, right?
Mhm,
Very
mhm.
small misdemeanor, doesn't carry a lot of time with it, but it's the first gateway to get you in. It's like, okay, now I got you here. I'll add a couple more charges here. You're likely to take a plea in this, but you didn't even understand that. You didn't even know, oh, I am okay. This is considered trespassing. Or you didn't know that when the cops came and spoke to you about it, you know that you started saying, oh well, A B C D F G, this is why I did it, or I had to go do this, and so now you've given up all your rights in this scenario. I mean, you didn't have to say a word. It was
Yeah.
innocent, so it's little things like that. And I think that I rely on legal literacy as prevention because it builds confidence. It builds your ability to advocate on behalf of yourself. It creates a sense of belonging in this system. It creates a
Mhm.
sense of
Yeah.
understanding, and I actually just taught on that. I did a session on that out in Baltimore for the American Association of Blacks in Higher Education. It was called Legal Literacy as a Pathway for Black Student Success and Belonging, right?
Mhm.
And it is. It's just literally confidence, advocacy, giving them different tools to work with.
Yeah, the idea of feeling like you're part of a society, a system that provides you with rights, as opposed to feeling excluded, othered, targeted, which often, is the case, right? There is a target, and so having some skills to help mitigate some of that, that's a powerful way to think about it. And also, the idea of trespass as a gateway. I mean, one of the things that it does is it creates a criminal justice footprint, right? You before didn't have a record and now you do. And that has implications for future interactions with law enforcement. And that ultimately drives things like mass incarceration, right? The number of people who are in prison, who are cycling through the system. Um, one of the things I'm interested in about your work is most public attention focuses on like policing or sentencing or prisons, but you have sort of a different take. What do you think gets overlooked in the conversation around mass incarceration and what we can do about it?
I did research starting here in Nashville, and I looked up all of the nonprofits here that had criminal justice reform, right? Because again, I'm coming from a lawyer background. I'm a for-profit lawyer. Yeah, I have my own law practice, and so I'm not in the nonprofit realm like that. But well, when I came out, only people who were really focusing on criminal justice reform are nonprofits. And I saw that, wow, they're all reactive efforts. Like, and let me explain that. They were creating solutions for someone that had already been found guilty or pled guilty. But as a criminal defense lawyer, I have to specialize in the proactive, right? This is so much time while I'm fighting the case before this person has a criminal footprint, right? In the system. I'm fighting this case and I'm coming up with innovative ways to solve it. What is the real issue here? Can we connect with an organization to do some work here? What are they missing? Oh, they're missing, they don't have community. They've harmed the community maybe by theft. They've done something, maybe, I don't know. So can they go get some mentorship and go work alongside this nonprofit that actually does some positive things? And, so you have to be thinking proactively in a way to be able to mitigate whatever they've been charged with. Right? Especially if, and again, like I said, you can come into the criminal justice system in multiple ways, right? And so you might have a little gateway, or you might be in smoking weed. Okay. It's legal in many places, but not here. But you might have been smoking marijuana, and instead of just charge you with a simple possession, they'll charge you with possession with the intent to resell. It's a felony. It's like, why did you do that? Well, you wanted to increase the chances that I would take a plea because I don't have the proper resources to fight it. And so if we had more people focusing proactively on this side where we have investigation, right, where we are pulling the personnel records of the officer, where we're doing the bulk of the work early on, that then helps this person not have to succumb to the criminal justice system in the normal way and end up taking a plea. 97% of people take pleas in the criminal justice system, right? So that is my thought process. if we were to take, and I know the issue with this is that the money is in the reactive efforts. I get it. For the money is in the money where their grants are in the reactive efforts, but it's because they don't want mass incarceration to go anywhere. You assume everyone is guilty, but if we changed our mindset to one that is truly innocent until proven guilty, we would fight harder on the front end to keep them from ever, right, having that felony on their record, ever being scarred by this system in that way. So that's my thought process, that we have to move from reactive efforts to more proactive efforts to fight mass incarceration if we truly want to make a dent in it.
How much of mass incarceration do you think is linked to things like economic vulnerability and instability? And how much of it do you think is linked to sort of systems issues, legal system issues?
It's both and. It's both and, right? The economic vulnerability and instability, I guess, lends to the financial literacy that we're devoid of, right? In the education portion. Not, I want to say literacy, like knowing about finances, but also having the opportunities, right? It is systemic when you live in food desert areas, right? It is systemic when you live in areas where you only have, the jobs that you can are hourly, you know, fast food jobs. It is systemic. And then the legal system issues. I mean, Lord Jesus, do we, like that portion? That portion is, I think, it keeps so many lawyers out of this realm because it's depressing, right? It's depressing because you lose more than you win. You already dealing with a cop who's overcharging, right? Then you get into the court system, and then now this person needs, they're maintaining their innocence, but they need funds to prove that. Right? They need a private investigator. And then until recently, one of the judges I helped get in office, she had created a project where people who were at the lower court were able to get private investigators funded. However, that's not normal, right? However, it helps. It helps abundantly. And so being able to not having the resources at that level to be able to fully fight your case, right? And then taking a plea, and now you're part of the 97%, or you did have the resources to fight, and maybe this judge is favoring the other side, right? Maybe they just favor whatever the state says. Maybe they don't want to rock the boat, and so then now you have to fight your case all the way up through criminal court. That takes years, it takes money, it takes time. So systemically, yeah, it's jacked, right? That's the huge portion of it. But the other side with the economic vulnerability and instability, that is a cycle, right? That does keep you coming right back in the system, and it does lead directly into mass incarceration, solely because what do you do when you don't have money and you need it?
Yeah. And I mean, to your point from earlier, not having money is also a driver of a lot of these crimes of poverty, or that are linked to poverty or trauma that comes from being in impoverished communities, under-resourced communities. Part of your sort of vision is not just legal literacy. You've mentioned a couple times there's a financial literacy component. And part of your financial literacy component is ownership. And I'm wondering how financial literacy and business ownership, or ownership of residences, or whatever your ownership definition is, how that is linked to criminal justice reform and criminal justice outcomes.
So listen, it goes back to what I was telling you. Remember when I was working for that lawyer, and you know, she was a private practice lawyer. She charged her value the majority of the time, and that then allowed her to be able to fund and represent many others who couldn't afford that. To be able to fight against systems, to be able to create initiatives. And so I was able to see her use that financial power to better the system, right? To be able to help more people. And so for me, that's why I created MFN, right? Which is my legal education company. And the reason I created it is because I wanted to be able to use the resources created here, social enterprise style, right? You think of Ben and Jerry's, you think of Tom's, you think of those different things where you're able to make money, right, on creating things that people like or people need or whatnot. But however, because of that, you're then able to fund things that matter way more, right? Where I'm funding, for instance, I trained an organization here in Nashville, Middle Tennessee National Action Network. And they were a new organization when I trained them in my DAMM advocacy program and DAMM disproportionately affected marginalized minority. But I trained them in that and they didn't have the funds. However, I have been paid by another organization. And so I take a portion of those funds and I just put it over here to the others that need it. So to me, I think that having financial literacy, and again, and here's another little piece I might not have said early on. I'm a certified business coach as well, and I'm a Gallup certified strengths coach. And so for me, when I was seeing that people don't have money and people are creating more crimes, they're doing more things to get into the criminal justice system because they are broke, they are in poverty, they have jobs that they can't ever scale in, they don't have investments, they're living with a choker around their neck. My thought process is always, okay, how do we free you? Because you can't do anything until we alleviate that stress, right? And so being able to show people how to make more money, being able to show people how to invest, showing people how to utilize a business, right? If that is there's not, and everybody doesn't want to have a business, I definitely understand that. But if someone does, right, that is an option for creating initiatives in the community that only you know how to solve because you're from the community. You truly know what they need. So that is a big encouragement for me. And I do that because I coach a lot of lawyers. So a lot of times I am trying to free them from feeling like they have to work within the system, letting them know it's good for you to come outside of the system, charge your value, get out, stop choking, pay off them loans, right? And then get out here and start creating what is needed to solve some of the biggest systemic issues. That's all. That's my thought process.
I mean, I think that the issue, I practiced when I was a public defender. I was in the Bronx and I was in Manhattan. So I'm a public defender, not a criminal defense lawyer by background. And the distinction obviously is just who's paying you and how much.
Absolutely.
But I do think if people charged in the areas where I worked, it would really put the legal services out of reach for most. And I'm wondering how you respond to that.
So I don't think so. I mean, you clearly have public defenders, right? You're always going to have public defenders. So because they have the right to a counsel. But I feel like, so for myself, I believe, and here's the thing. Our public defender's office is overwhelmed all the time, and so they conflict off a lot of cases. And those cases go to court-appointed lawyers, right? Some of them are court-appointed lawyers. Those are just private lawyers getting paid by the state, right? And so instead of having to go, and these are, and when you're in the DAMM community, disproportionately affected marginalized minority community, people already have a negative connotation with that, anything that's coming from the government, the one who's doing this very thing to them, right? They think they all work together. And so because of that, they do not want a public defender. They want someone they feel is independently going to fight for them. And so it is important to have those people that are in reach for them to be able to hire, to be able to work with. A lot of times they want you to build under nonprofits. They want you to work for the state. I've worked for the state. I used to work for DHS back in the day, long hours, little pay, burnout, and that's a lot of times when people's cases are getting swept under the rug, and that's actually adding to mass incarceration. So I think a balance of quality lawyers who are private is very necessary in the system.
And so, and what about the folks who are impacted by the legal system? Do you have a financial literacy vision for them as well?
Yeah. So for those actually impacted by the legal system, my thought process is always now I don't do anything. I don't necessarily teach them, but I collaborate, right? I just incorporated a nonprofit and I collaborate with, like, say, I had a young man who is from Nashville and he is a top world trader. He's really been able to do well for himself in that realm. And so I like to go get people who I know resonate with the people who are more likely going to come into this community. I mean, come into this, excuse me, criminal justice system. And then I bring them quality experts, right? I bring them quality experts. I bring them people that can give them the information that they desperately want to know. One big thing is like, well, hey, we hear a lot about investing. Why hasn't anybody ever came and taught me about that? Like, what can I do? How does that work? What does my 401 do? What do I need to be investing in? So even when if I am working at KFC, I'm actually building something that's a little bit that can grow and that can go into, that can create more wealth for me over time. I'm being smarter with the decisions I'm making, and we don't have that a lot in this community. We don't have the people coming to give us that kind of information. And so for me, I think it takes collaborating with those who have that information and actually have that reach, right? Who have that reach for people who are in the community, who can speak to them in ways that, in like, I might come and, you'll have some people coming up like, oh, I remember a young man, he was a juvenile, and he said to me, I don't want to be a plumber. I don't want to do, I don't want to be what did he say? A pest control. I don't want to do that. Right? I want to do something else. I want to learn how to make money in a different way. And when you don't have access to someone to help you learn to make money in a different way, then you start to look at those around you and you start to do what others are doing, which may be illegal. So for me, I think it is just necessary to have those options for people who are likely to come into the criminal justice system.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's right. Having access to all kinds of future hope, right? I mean, it's just about sort of saying like, well, there are other paths forward. If you don't have access to that, it's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine what you don't know. Yeah, I think
That
that's
is it, Jessica. It's hard to imagine what you don't know and never see in real time on a daily basis. And so then you do what you do see on a daily basis. If you live in the damn community, a lot of times you are in a bubble and you're seeing a lot of negative things. You have to be exposed to other things that are quality, education, quality, people that they respect, people that they see doing great things. It's like, okay, not just a rapper, not just someone doing that, entertainment. We have a lot of, we need, yeah, yeah. Who I could go all day on that one.
so. What is your dream about what you're doing? If you could implement changes tomorrow that you think would really have an impact on future incarceration and future involvement in the criminal justice system, what would you imagine? What would you do?
Darn, Jessica, you don't know how many podcasts I do. And this is the first time I've been asked this question. I really love it. And let me take a moment here. My dream would be for every school, right? Especially every public school, to teach legal literacy, right? Specifically the fourth, fifth, and sixth amendment in a deeper way. Um, I would love if the colleges did the same. They had that as part of their, just, it's like you're a freshman. This is part of the curriculum for a freshman. A lot of them are likely to get in trouble for the first time there. They don't have their parents. A lot of consent issues come up. A lot of just things happen at that level. So I think that that would be a dream if legal literacy was being taught as a standard subject. That would make my heart smile on a different level. And I know it's going to be hard because even like contacting schools, money is very tight, things are tight, and they prioritize in a different way. And legal literacy is never the one that they rise to the forefront. But that would be my dream.
Yeah, and I mean it seems so in some ways such low-hanging fruit to include some of these basic things which are part of all of our constitutions, which, I always ask people, have you read your constitution